However, we do have barriers. And one of my barriers were, the fact that I had been incarcerated. And I vowed to myself when I was there to do whatever I could to change my life and to not have to experience it again. I took business classes, drug classes, everything that I could take that would, better my situation. However, when I got out, I was slapped in the face with child support. I didn't know that 6.5 years that I was gone for racketeering and child support for the team from. And so, again, I was, about to go to prison, went to court, and thankfully, Mr. Steve was there. And he saw something in me. He gave me an opportunity. And I started coming to class. I actually worked the program. I had somebody that was holding me accountable for everything. Steve, I had to be there on Monday with regular participants. I had to come in on Fridays, have a one-on-one meeting with, I had to make sure my job paper was filled out properly. Judge Raymond, when you come before him, the second Friday of every month, you don't want to see no zeros. So I had to make weight, and the most important thing is that I wanted to take care of my kids. Before prison, I never had an issue with child support, but as I stated earlier, I just made some wrong choices. And choices I made back in 2002 followed me all the way up until I got into the class. So I beat down the door of every company I knew of. I worked in job connection, tighten up my resume, network, whatever she had from my Delta EOC. One of the best things that happened also was the fact that they gave me a license there. So I could drive, to get to the places I needed to get to. And fortunately, I worked through a temp contract at Leach House. I did good. They let me go out on 9 days. I got the young manager out there, kept up the program, frustrated at times. I kept going, Steve kept encouraging me, and they eventually called me back, gave me an opportunity. Not only had that job, I got a second job. And I'm just here to say for anybody that you may know that needs that help, that this really is a good program. We have a lot of valuable resources. The DOC has a lot, and the person who works with it, they definitely work.
Let's give the young man another round. We call that a leader. And that's what it really is about. And I'm blessed to serve fully in my full-time capacity as supervisor for Frank Johnson Community Center. And I know about that. Every day we deal with young men that have challenges. But our goal and our intent today is to help save their lives and redirect their lives. And it's doable, it's possible. I was sitting here reading the brochure. One of the things that got my attention most of all was investment in our citizens and the community. Investment in our citizens and the community. And that's really what it's about. I can remember hearing from Mayor Ellis when I was working with him. One of the things that he always encouraged us to do and the community to do was to build human beings. He said, no amount of brick and mortar is greater or has greater value than the human being. The greatest of the great when it comes to what we should be building and making better. Thank you. Okay. Thank you too, sir, for disrupting that prison from classroom to prison pipeline. We got to do that. We have to do that. Proactively in a way that is positive and doesn't have to come to them being confined. But of course, confinement has value, as we can see. refine. Okay? So we thank you for that.
Excuse me, can you tell us something about the brochures?
Grocery we have on tables and back. These are outreach programs of which Problem Solving Board is one. Our holiday program is also listed, as well as our child access visitation program, which we have here in Macon as well. So those are all listed. We also have a green sheet, which has our contact information and all of our other services that we provide. So if you would have access to those, please take one. We have some more on the table, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Just to give you an update as to where we are, we're about to hear from our last speaker for this particular part of the session today. Following Mr. Hicks, Attorney Hicks, we're going to do a real quick little break in action with our question and answer session for the first half of this, and then following that, we'll be hearing from Ms. Phyllis Blake, and also we'll be talking about voter education. There's a lot to be said about voter education. I was confirmed with our local chapter president when Westbrook on yesterday, and she was sharing some information with me regarding voter education that will flourish. There's a lot of work to be done in there, and we're right on time today with this meeting. Let's give Madam President a round of applause. Because the word is six are these days. That Madam President is probably the most powerful NAACP local chapter president that we've had since Reverend Julius Holt. Amen. And I know about Reverend Holt. Amen. He was the man. So we thank God for you, and we thank God for your leadership and what you're doing today with the new Macon NAACP. Okay? All right, last but not least, we want to welcome to the microphone our other sharp dressed man today, Attorney Kevin Hicks. Give it up to him.
Thank you, sir. Protocol having earlier been established, I'd just like to say thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm Attorney Kevin Hicks, but please understand first and foremost, my most important job is that of a father. You see, I have 4 children, 3 boys, 2 of which are twins. And I take great pride in being a father with legal experience because education is obviously critical and key. I'd also like to point out that, and this is the reality, folks, I was in court a couple of weeks ago. My client actually happened to be in the unfortunate situation of owing $62,000 in child support arrears. $62,000. That number might sound surprising to many of you out in the audience, but I did not see a flinch by Ms. Monica, and Mr. G.B.R here, because these are numbers that we hear often, folks, often. And unfortunately, there's a disparate impact on certain things that happen in our community that affect the African American male more so than others. Now, we can make a lot of excuses for it, can't we? We can come up with all kinds of reasons why that happens. But I think that the testament here is the reality. You see, this sharp-dressed young man, not just because he has on a bow tie, but because his pants are not saggy, but because his shirt is tucked in, but because he has on a nice pair of shoes, and but because he is well-groomed. And guess what? It doesn't matter how much he paid for all that. What matters is that he recognized that there was a set of circumstances that placed him in a situation that he figured, I need to work out. How did he do that? How did he do that? He became educated. He became educated. And something was discussed earlier that is so important. It is knowledge and education being key. But for the diversity of programs that we have in this county, this gentleman would probably be in jail. I need you to understand, as a legal practitioner, I have the privilege of working with not only mothers, but fathers and defending them in court. And when I do that, it is not to make an excuse for someone not to pay child support. It is for you to step up to your responsibility and figure out what needs to be done. But when we have such circumstances that is disproportionate, this gentleman I have seen multiple times take folk who are walking up to Judge Philip T. Raymond III, standing before him about to have the bailiffs contacted to come in to take them to jail. And I walk in every other Friday morning that we have this pants hanging off their behind, with tennis shoes on and gym clothes. And on the way up the elevator, I listen to them. You know what they say? They tell me, I'm not paying. I don't care what they say. I don't know why that mother took child support out on me. That is not what happened. You had a child, you owe to support that child. But on the way out of the courthouse, you know what they're saying? Nothing to me. They're saying it to the bailiff on the way to the jail. So what do we do? That should be the real question. Knowledge and education, folks. You see, the United States Constitution afforded us with a very significant right, one that has not ever been questioned in our country. It is the 14th Amendment. It requires that you receive due process of law. That means you have the right to notice and an opportunity to be heard. That's where I come in. Because sometimes we don't speak very well for ourselves. Sometimes we have to have someone to understand and maneuver through the rules and say, you know what, I know Mr. Giglio will be in court today. We should speak with him and see if you qualify for that program. Someone who said, do not ignore the notice that you received. There was a form of pamphlet I saw. I've seen it multiple times. I give it out as often as I can. It comes from the Department of Health and Human Services. It says, it speaks to multiple notices that are received, that are sent, certified, guaranteed that the person has received it. What happens? It becomes ignored. When it becomes ignored, you don't come to court. When you don't come to court, they call these gentlemen. When you call these gentlemen, they come pick you up. When they come pick you up, they take you to jail. When you get to jail, they cut off your license. When you get out of jail, if you get out of jail, you can't drive. When you can't drive, you can't go to work. When you can't go to work, you can't pay your child support. I probably can stop there.
No, you got
5 minutes ago. Nonetheless, I'll get into this. I love the county that I work in. I love the county. It is a county that, in my opinion, is fair from the standpoint of dealing with child support issues. Because we are effective in preventing many gentlemen from being taken off to jail. And I will end on another, just applauding you again. I really hope that I can create a relationship with you today. That I can use the people I teach Virginia College, Central Technical College in the evenings. And I see so many folks, and I always make this comment, and please don't be mad at me saying this. I have 4 children, and one baby's mom, and she happens to be my wife.
Well, all right. I like that.
Let me replace it.
Come on, lay around with this Dr. Giglio. Because you know Doc, if Doc tell you this, that word is on.
We're not gonna have any speeches off of this floor. I wait to the Lord. You know you my buddy, but we're not gonna talk about 30 seconds for your questions, okay? 30 seconds.
Okay, man, all right.
Attorney Hicks, could you explain to the audience, to educate us? You started on the elevator, when they get on the elevator going to court. Could you explain the process from the time the young lady go and apply for child support? I might have asked you the process, but between the two of you, explain the audience, educate us on the process of how you get to the elevator from the process of how this happens.
Generally, the process is probably better explained to the folks who manage the notices and whatnot. I'll speak from my standpoint. Most of the time when I get involved, unfortunately, the notices are past the time for response. And honestly, most of the time when I have a client come in my office, they have already received the initial notices regarding their being behind on the child support. There's a wonderful form here. You got this. It explains it very well. And actually, it's one of the better flowcharts I've seen regarding this process. It's got day 1, day 31, and day 30. That's the process. And I think the beauty of the process is it provides for notice. That's where I come in. If you did not receive notice, then obviously there should be no action against But if you have received notice and there's confirmation of that notice being received, then you can't blame it on the Department of Child Support Services for proceeding through and covering money. And as far as the actual process, I'll, be able to spend.
Okay, the process for us to actually receive a child support case, we can first of all receive a referral from the Department of Family and Children Services. Basically, that referral is for any custodial parent that is receiving TANF or medical support. We have an obligation to pursue the non-custodial parent to repay the state for the benefits that were provided to that child. A second way that we receive services or requests for service of child support is to walk into the office and actually complete an application for services. Or custodial parents have the option of going onto our child support portal and completing an application that way. The third way is through interstate. We may have a custodial parent that lives in another state. The non-custodial parent is here in Georgia. So they will actually go into the state where they reside and apply for child support services. What we do at the point of receiving an application is we use any of the information that's provided from the custodial parent to locate the non-custodial parent. If the information is not enough, we have several locate resources that we use. Once we're able to have a good address on the non-custodial parent, we actually file what's called a petition for support. When we file that petition, we also notify the non-custodial parent either by process service, which can be done by our process servers here in Bibb County. In a lot of counties, it could be the sheriff's office that actually take the petition to the non-custodial parent. This also gives them an opportunity to settle the case, which means we offer to them what we are seeking for child support and give them an opportunity to work with us. There may be times when paternity is a concern, so we offer the opportunity for them to have paternity testing. The paternity testing, there is not a charge for it initially. If the non-custodial parent is found to be the father, then they will have to reimburse the state. If they're not the father, the case is automatically closed. Once we establish paternity, we then establish child support based on looking at the custodial parent's income as well as the non-custodial parent's income. And we come up with an amount for them to pay child support. So they're notified throughout the process. What happens to bring it to court is when a non-custodial parent do not pay for whatever reason, they don't participate in the services, the outreach services that we have available, then it results in enforcement action being brought. And that's where the attorneys may come into play.
You have another question? Oh,
Is the question something that she needs to
I just
answer?
had a comment. I just wanted to thank you, and thank you, Nora, for the question. So you took us all the way through it. And isn't it something how you can take the law and that process and go back and put people in debtor's prison? Because that's what it amounts to, I always saw that. And that's how we get around it legally, locking people up in debtor's prison, which is how long was it in England? Way back then. But you can actually imprison a person, but they can't imprison you if you're not paying the charge card or owing somebody some money or something. But you can lock a man up, which is debt for a debt to the state or whoever.
all right, 30 seconds.
And that's it. I just wanted to make that comment. And Lord, don't be coming out. These people have a right to make a statement.
Everybody understand?
The attorney.
Because everybody wants to speak.
The attorney is one that bounce off of her.
Let me just say this.
Could I?
All right, hold on, we want to hear from the chapter president.
Let me just say this. We do have a time frame, but we do need to give people time to answer the questions and get the answer. That's the purpose of the forum, to get the community involved in that. I think, because it's gonna take me more more than 30 seconds. Then.
Well, 30 seconds was a long time. She didn't even speak for 25 seconds.
This is not an appropriate place for this, so we're not gonna do it that way. We're gonna do it this way. We're gonna give the people time to answer the question, because it's gonna take, because of the seriousness of this. And because, yeah, but we're on tape.
Time.
Okay.
30 seconds.
It's gonna take.
Right, 11:30. We're not doing too bad.
If we were gonna do this, it should have been planned, been done in a plan section. So we have to give the people time enough to answer the question and get the answer back. Because like I say, this is a series of issues, and what I have to add, because we sponsored the event, it's the answer that I need to get from child support that's gonna take me longer than 30 minutes. 30 seconds, I mean. The first question that I have is, because of the cross reference, and I guess I'm trying to figure out who's targeted, because you cross reference, and once a person becomes employed, they're immediately identified as being employed, and their money is being taken out of their check, even if they apply for unemployment, or child support is taken out. So you cross reference. So who's actually targeted as far as not paying child support? Because what I'm seeing is, even though you are child support recovery, we're gonna have to appeal the law that affects, because I am totally against suspending someone's driver's license and professional license for non-payment of child support. Because what we look at when you set up child support, and this is just recently changed, not always been like this, because they only look at the non-conservative parents' income, which should have never been allowed. Because both parents conceived that child, it should have never been allowed to just look at one parent's income. But when you go to child support recovery, am I not correct that it's based on your income?
Yes, it's based on both parents' income.
Okay, now, and I'm saying this because I sit in some of these cases and I listen to some of these cases. When a person is not employed, it's actually based on, normally it's based on 40 hours a week at minimum wage. That's what you all want to say. That's unrealistic. You have to, I just feel that when you look at setting child support for a person that's not employed, you need to look at that person's, and maybe that's not their fault that they didn't get a high school diploma. But what I'm saying is, if you got somebody got a 9th grade education, they're not gonna be working on a job that will give you 40 hours a week. Now, I've sat in cases and listened to Judge Brown say that if you got this person, child support said 40 hours a week at minimum wage, but that's not, he can't afford to pay that. He said it, or he can afford to pay it. So that's not happening yet. So this person is child support is still getting further behind, because that has not been done. Child support cannot set that person's child support to where he can pay it. So that's my concern. You have to take a lot of things into consideration when you set the person's child support that is not employed. And that's why I'm trying to find out who's targeted, because you cross-reference. As soon as somebody starts working, that Social Security number alerts you. I've dealt with people to where they have $1 about their check. So, you can't live if you're basing it on that. These laws don't have to be changed. I don't think that a person should. I think that the reason it's so screwed up now is because of the law. It should never have been for one parent. I may be the custodian parent, I've made $100,000, but you have another custodian parent that makes $25,000. They solely have, in the past, based it on that $25,000 non-custodian parent's income. So we're gonna have to attack the laws. I know child support recovery is basically doing their job and basing it on what the law says. But out of this, that's what the NAACP is gonna be targeting, because it's a disparity, it's mostly affected Afro-American men. In passing out flyers, I talked to different people that are in that situation. They're not even given a temporary license to work. Some jobs require you a driver's license. You have to have a driver's license to work. So to me, suspending someone's driver's license for no payment of child support does not support economic stability.
I would, in response to that, I would like to just give you some other statistical information. Currently, we receive about 60% of the child support that's obligated on the child support cases. So that leaves 40% that we're not collecting. What we've realized is that a large number of those non-custodial parents that's not paying on a regular basis have barriers. Those barriers could be lack of an education. Maybe they don't have a high school diploma. Or they could be unemployed or underemployed. And that's where our outreach services come into play. We have the Fatherhood Program, as I previously stated, and because there's 56,000 non-custodial parents that could be served by that program, we only have 3,000 participants. So that means we need more individuals enrolled in our Fatherhood Program. We also have the problem-solving court that Mrs. Stephen Giglio just mentioned. We only have a little over 1,000 participants. So between the two programs, there's only 4,000 individuals that's being served. It's not because we're not putting the services out there. I think, we haven't done as good of a job as we should in educating the public. So what we're doing is, and I'll get your question. What we're doing is, starting in April, we're going to do what's called a fatherhood campaign. We're actually meeting with the judges in every judicial circuit throughout the state of Georgia just to let them know about the outreach services that's available. As a result of a non-custodial parent enrolling in the outreach services to improve their opportunity of becoming gainfully employed, we're reinstating their licenses. So basically, we're working with the non-custodial parent. We do recognize the fact that there have been a lot of non-custodial parents that have not been able to pay their support, so we're taking a different approach. We're still enforcing the child support, but we're making sure that we're making the public as aware as possible of the additional services that we're providing within child support. Yes.
This is like, I got a partner of mine, and his daughter like 21 years old now. And he's incarcerated right now as we speak for the child support. I don't think it's fair. Because he got a daughter, she got her own life now.
And it's very likely that those arrears accrued during the time that she was underage, and for whatever reason we didn't receive the child support payments.
The thing is, on the paper though, he made some payments. Like he made like partial payments, because he was incarcerated himself. And then when he got out of there, he started picking up the payments, he was still behind.
Okay.
Now, it reduced it. Now he incarcerated again, the child.
Okay. And it's going to be important for him to try to talk with child support as much as he can. I know that you said he's incarcerated. We also have an initiative where we're working directly with the prisons. We're working with the transitional centers. We're working with the prisons because we realize that along the way, maybe we have not provided as much education that needed to be provided. So we have services in place to work directly with them.
It's not a people out there from the same school I'm from. We want jobs. But if there ain't no job don't open, what can we do? I mean, we gotta take care of ourselves. We gotta take care of the citizens and life and everything too. I mean, if you ain't open no job, what do you expect?
Okay, and that's where, like I said, that's where our outreach program comes in. We work with you to try to address those things. Let me get back to you on that. I have it in my notes, and I don't want to hold up the time, but I'll definitely get back to you on that. Yes, that's part of the Fatherhood campaign. Right now, we're planning to meet with all of the judges. Additionally, we're going to be doing some radio broadcasts. And we're planning yes, we'll look at that also. Thank you.
I'm happy to see that you all are coming out to the public.
Second thing, young lady behind you, right? And then we really do have to move on to
I'd like to
the top
see,
of the hour.
a better program is whereas, sheriffs go out and find the fathers and bring them in, because some of them just is not gonna work. If they work, they get paid under the table, and with the little information that their parent, all she can give you, my son now is 16, and I think you seen, a lump sum of payment, when he was, locked up for suspended license, and he was supposed to be driving. And that's the only time we receive some money from him. I like to see, the sheriff and people go out there and get these falls. That's what I want. Bring me my money.
Thank you. Very quickly, please, very quickly.
It's really good, and it's amazing that you all are addressing the fathers. And when you start your program for the fathers, I'm going to give you a little something to think about from the 50s. I grew up in the 50s, and times got hard. Most of my friends, we were from two-parent homes. It was a poor neighborhood. But when the mothers, the black mothers, finally went to the welfare, that man had to leave the house. They broke up more homes. It started there, and it has perpetuated itself throughout the system. So when you meet with those fathers, you're young, but apologize to them for the wrong that was done, because the Department of Family and Children Services has been responsible for the breakup of more homes than anybody in this country.
Okay, for spirited comments and discourse, Dr. Vito.
I just wanted to, Ms. Westbrook brought up the idea about the law. You know, that's basically, what we're here for, to see how we can work with just law. I asked Attorney Wayne Kendall to approach the podium and sit down, as well as Mr. Heath, Kevin Heath. I just wanted to, sort of address this today in regards to what do they think we need to do in terms of impacting the laws that seem to be. I mean, I heard what Mrs. Smith said, and the way she and Mr. Giglio talked, everything is working fine, but we know it's not. And what is it within the law? Can you answer that question, Mr. Campbell, Mr. Hicks? That creates injustice.
The gentleman that just joined us is Attorney Wayne, I'm sorry, Kendall Hicks, out of Atlanta. Please welcome him. One moment before we proceed, Madam President.
I have one more question, but I think it's late.
Okay, what do we want to do? Do we want to go ahead and wrap up and close out this part one of the session?
I just want to say one thing before we close out.
Okay, quick break. One thing that I did want to find out from the audience, though, before we wrap up the initial part of this today, is are there any more questions very quickly related to my other topic that we dealt with in part one of the session today, and that is education. Were there any questions?
I think the sense of the audience is that they want to keep the program going, because, it's first day of spring, I mean, it's a beautiful day.
It's not a problem. It's not a problem, but we do have a format, and the Madam President wanted us to honor and to stick to. So what we can do at this point, and I think it might be appropriate to do so, is maybe break right now, very quickly, or continue.
I have one more question.
I think I asked a question about the
One
law.
moment, please.
No.
Just one moment, let her finish. Let her finish. Okay, Madam President, go ahead.
I asked a question, my question has been answered.
Okay, Dr. Kuko's question, had a question about the law.
Yeah,
You have a question, Doctor? Okay. What do you want to
She
do?
asked what do they recommend that we do? Is that what you asked?
Yeah.
Okay, now do we want
What
to
kind
let
of
the
law?
attorneys answer that question for you, Doc? Is that correct?
That's what I think.
Okay, all right, we'll start with our guest on the line, Mr. McKinney.
Today, I enjoyed my prayer and hear from the man. The question that Dr. Kuko's asked is one that is kind of a two-edged sword. from my perspective. We're here to just talk about locking all the guys up. And I don't think that's really the solution, but there is a problem that is twofold. You got women that have children that need support, and you got men that, in many cases, my experience has been assured in their responsibility. Now, should a person be put in jail for not being able to pay child support? In my opinion, is absolutely not. If they're not able, but if a person is able to pay and chooses not to pay,
That's what I'm talking about right there.
then that's an entirely different circumstance. And the law provides that if a judge can determine that a person is not willfully, who has the means to pay, then that person can be punished by incarceration. However, some of the other things that go along with child support as it currently stands, such as taking a person's driver's license, taking a license to practice a particular profession or to be an electrician, I'm not so sure those measures are not counterproductive. I don't know if they really serve the purpose of getting people back on the rolls of paying child support. The other programs that we heard about here, about the fatherhood program, all of those programs are good. I don't know how well they are attended or how well they are promoted. It sounds like the program that's here in Bibb County is a good program. We had some success, and I certainly enjoyed hearing from this young man who obviously is the poster child for that program. So there's some good things happening. Incarceration for not paying child support, I think for the most part, is not a good thing. However, we do have those individuals who, like the attorney said in the elevator, come up to court and say, I ain't paying no matter what, I don't care. And the only way to get the attention of individuals like that, a lot of times, is incarceration, unfortunately. Because a mother is out there having children or has had children, and I have this conversation several times a week. I had it yesterday with females who I asked the question, and I have yet to get a real good answer. Why are you having babies by guys who you know don't have any intent of supporting their own children? Now, I'm yet to get a real good answer. And yesterday, a young lady called me. Her boyfriend just got locked up for 40 years, 13 in prison, 30 on probation. The day before yesterday, she's had 2 children by some other guy who is not supporting her children, who lives in California. She got married to another individual. They got divorced. She then started living with this guy. She's 34, he's 38. And then he gets locked up and is now facing a 10-year sentence. And she's calling me about representing him after he's been locked up, after he's paid some other lawyer $30,000 or $40,000. And she wants to know from me, can I help him get out of jail? I said, so let me get this right. You got 2 kids by some other guy who's not supporting his children. You've been divorced from one guy. And now you're getting ready to take your money and pay a lawyer to get this other guy out of jail who just got locked up for 10 years? And she started laughing. I said, don't get me wrong, I'm a lawyer. I'm in the business of taking people's money for services. But does that make sense to you? So it goes back to the source a lot of times. Why are we allowing and not encouraging the females in our society amongst us to have judgment and better sense about how they use their bodies? It's not only on the men, it's also on the women. It's a two-edged sword here. Now that's the idealistic point of view. The reality is that we have these people that have all these children, and they do need the support. It's not incumbent upon the state, it's not incumbent upon anybody other than the father of those children to take care of their own children. So I'm 100% for fathers taking care of their children. And we have people in my own family. One of my cousins died, never took care of his kids. And when he died, the stepfather of his child called me and said, well, can you talk to his daughter? She didn't want to come to the funeral. I said, well, if I talk to her, you're not going to like what I have to say to her because I can't blame her for not wanting to come to his funeral. Because he never took care of his child. So, in essence, he's not the father. So, I mean, to get back to your point, Dr. Smith, it's a two-edged sword. I'm not for necessarily locking all these folks up, but at the same time, these folks have to accept the responsibility of the children that they have brought into this world. Every child deserves the support of two parents.
I know you said that you felt like it was not productive to take their licenses away. I heard that. I thought.
Yes.
I wanted to ask Ms. Smith, do you think, from your position, have you gained anything by taking those licenses away? Were you in support of that?
I'm in support of taking care of children. So I think what we need to do is
Make sure that we work with both parents to see what needs to be done. And after we try to do everything that we can to assist the non-custodial parent, like I said, in offering outreach and all of the services and resources that we have available, after we've done everything that we have available, we don't have any other choice but to enforce the case. And which could be driver's license being suspended. Sure.
I just want to speak to the driver's license issue. It's something pretty significant issue. I completely concur with my colleague here in regards to the comments he made. But in all fairness, I think we need to understand a couple of critical points. Number one, DHS, this department, they are an enforcement agency. They enforce based on the laws that you voted for, unless you did not vote. Now, if you didn't vote, therein is the issue. Okay, just be understandable of that. Be an activist for change, but to start that activism, you do not wait until the issue has arisen. You have to work in front of it. And you need to understand, it is not beneficial to incarcerate men when they owe child support. I can't tell you how many times Mr. Robert Sykes, who is one of the special attorneys for the department, and I have had a conversation where we have discussed, I do not want to take his driver's license because he's not going to be able to go to work. I do not want to put him in jail because he's not going to be able to go to work. If he can't work, he cannot make the money to pay the child support. It is not beneficial. But folks, if you do not vote, you cannot affect change. Now, this driver's license issue, I will tell you from my personal experience, there are folks who I sit in court on those Fridays and see 60 men, generally, 95% of them black. And while most of them are there on that day, it's because their license is suspended. So you know what? For the mothers who call me and say, I cannot afford to take care of my child because I'm not receiving adequate money from the other parent, the non-custodial parent, and they say, what can I do? And we file a motion for contempt on those, and we try to bring them in. I say, let's get what you're owed. And for the fathers who can't afford to pay the child support, I say, let's determine whether you really owe it. Let's see if we can work out arrangements. But folks, the answer is not that the child suffers. That is not the answer. Let's be very careful. And I'm sorry, I get passionate about these issues. Why? Because I have 4 children. And I care about how children are cared for in our state. And unfortunately, the perpetuation that was mentioned earlier is even more severe than that young lady mentioned, who I happen to know and didn't realize who she was until just a few minutes ago. The perpetuation is the fact that, unfortunately, we are not taking care of our kids. It's not the DHS or the mother that's taking child support out. You did that when you had the child, whether you're the father or the mother. So when you have that child, it's time to step up. And if you can get a job, you should pay. If you can't, I don't think we should put you in jail. we need to work something out to try to help you, assist you. And the way you get that is by understanding and having education about these programs that these folks are offering.
Because I'm a woman myself, but we need to look at, although men are mostly affected by the child support, we do have women that are affected by child support because a lot of times now, grandparents are raising their children. So women are having to pay child support, and they're in contempt also because they have to pay child support to the grandparents. I'm seeing more and more now, because I work for the Department of Family and Children Services. I'm seeing more and more now where fathers are having to have custody of their children, and it's the other way around. But it all falls back onto the law. It falls back onto the law because when you come to the Department of Family and Children Services, as long as if you're applying for, example, Medicaid for your children, they don't actually do the father leaves. It doesn't matter. But if you come and you apply for Medicaid for yourself as a mother, that's when you have to give the father name. The law is backwards. It's about the children. They should be asking you who the father is when you come apply for the children. You don't have to give the father's name as long as you're not applying for yourself. So the law is backwards. That's the thing that we have to look, we're going to have to tag. It's the law. It falls back to the law. Why would you ask for a parent's father of the child's name when you're applying for yourself? They do not ask. We do not ask who the father of your child is if you're just applying for Medicaid for the children. And that's the purpose of you applying for benefits for the children. That's the purpose of child support for the children, but you don't have to give that information. It's only when you come down there and you apply for benefits for yourself that you have to give the father's name. Now, I want people to understand that I'm not against people taking care of their children. I think that they should take care of their children. But because of the law, the way it's been so long, it has actually caused a disparity with child support and with fathers and mothers paying child support because of the way the law has been. They've gotten so far behind in the rules. It needs to be another way besides suspending driver's license and suspending driver's license and professional license. We have to come up with another way. And I think that's something that we're going to be working here. I invited our state representatives because we elect them and we put them in office, and they need to be to these forums so they can hear the concerns of the community. And like Mr. Wick said, that we come to these forums, but if you're not ready to vote, your voice is not heard, we need to get out and vote.
And with that said, I just can't reiterate what I read in the word. It's amazing as you listen, and if you're really paying attention, we're going to have to end on that note, really, truly, officially. I'm sorry, sir, but we're going to have to end on that note because we're just past the top of the hour. We really need to get off now to the chief business at hand of today, and that's talking about voter education. But I cannot get away from this again. Investment in our citizens and the community. These two issues that we talked about this morning, education and child support, are so interconnected. You hear horror stories here coming out of this about young men being locked down under circumstances that are very trying, and a system that very well may be helping to perpetuate that in some respect, but at the same time, the system having some safeguards in place and being proactive to try to assist them. But then you get back to mothers, in the example of the attorney just gave earlier. So again, to me it seems that they're both interconnected, and it begins with truly education. We were talking about education earlier, and that's catching young people and children early, in my estimation, and developing them and guiding them and teaching them about responsibility, personal responsibility. That's what I believe. It will be very helpful to this process. And that's my 2 cents in this forum. It's been a pleasure hosting the department and the initial part of our program today. I'm going to give it up the microphone here shortly because I have to, not because I really want to, because I got to move on and turn it over to a very capable lady, your local chapter president, Ms. Women. Follow me for very quick break now. Before we're going to get an announcement this way. First, is that right? Okay. All right. Well, please welcome to the microphone to tell people in part 2 of the day, your local NAACP chapter president. Give it up for Ms. Woodland.
Good evening. I'm very passionate about the work that I'm doing. At this time, I want to welcome the city right from the NAACP State Conference. I'm sure this conference is going to get some information about college education.
Thank you so much. Oh, what a pleasure to be here. And I tell you, everything that everybody has said played into my presentation. I am Phyllis Blake, and I am the chairperson of the Local Action Committee of the Joint State Conference of the NAACP. This is the day that the Lord has made. That is what we're glad in. And I have distributed this plan is what all that I have heard from each one of the presenters as well as this young man. But our theme, annual theme for this year is all in for justice and equality. And I would like to thank Mrs. Westbrook as well as Dr. Smith, who are both on the Political Action Committee. In fact, we only, in this particular situation, we have 2 on the committee from the same unit. All the rest of us are from discouraged students throughout the state. And they both have done a superb job. And we're just so proud of both of those young ladies. So let's just give them a hand. And I'm not mentioning too, I'm representing the Joint State President, who is Reverend Dr. Francis Johnson, and he also provides his group. Now, getting down to the education portion, I think everybody knows that you should be registered to vote. And I certainly hope everybody in here is registered to vote. And if not, we have a voter application form over there for you to apply and to give to Mrs. Westbrook. So make sure that you are a registered voter. Now, if you have moved since the last election, you need to register. If you have changed your name, you need to register. And if you are a former felon who has paid your debt to society, that means paid your fines and released from probation of parole, then you are eligible to vote. And please share this with all of your neighbors and friends and take a few of those application forms so you can register them. Yes, ma'am.
Could you repeat the felon?
Yes, ma'am. If you are a former felon who has paid your debt to society, that means paying all of your fines and been released from probation or parole.
We have to be probation too?
Yes, all probation.
For how long?
Huh?
For how long?
No, the day that you off probation, one day that you register the next. And we're trying to, it's not just talking about establishing laws, we're trying to work with the person who's responsible for that, the probation officer, to hopefully register that person once he or she is off probation. They have the registration forms there. We're trying to work through that as a organization. So yes, keep that in mind. And be sure to remember that elected officials make very important decisions that affect support for public schools as well as care for the elderly. So those are all of the reasons for us to vote. And then, Mrs. Westbrook has a good campaign and working with the voter activation network, that's the VAN system, where she can identify as the president of the NAACP. And this is the system that's owned by the NAACP, where we can identify all the unregistered voters as well as voters here in Bibb County. So she needs members, plenty of members. I have application forms, it's only $30, and I have some here today. So you can join the NAACP and volunteer and help her identify these people, get them out to the polls, as well as register the ones who are unregistered in all the different precincts around the city. So keep that in mind. And it is, now, did you say we had some state representatives here? Did we have elected officials? Okay.
I don't see any.
Okay. All right. And that played into the other thing that I had to say. But getting back to what Dr. Freeman said about the different bills, we are asking all of our citizens, members, and everybody that we need to call on Monday. You can call on Monday and ask that your representative oppose SB 133. SB 133. And if you do not know your representative's name, you can, I know everybody has access to the internet. Please write this down and tell all your friends. This is the link that you can enter on into your web browser. It's http:// bit.ly, another / am I going too fast? Okay, http:// two of them, bit, B as in boy, IT, period, ly, / 1, V like in victory, capital F like in Frank, lowercase d, 2, the number 2, a capital G, and M. Okay, and Mrs. Westbrook has this email also with the same information in it. Now, once you enter that into your web browser, you get the Common Cause website where you can enter your address and your zip code as well as your postal code. And it will give you all your elected officials, starting with President Obama. Yes, sir.
Can you tell me what is SB 133?
SB 133 is the bill where the state will take over the schools that are failing. And the NAACP has researched that, and we all are opposed to that, and asked all of our representatives and senators to vote against it. It's passed the Senate. They've already adopted it, and it's in the House now. So call your representatives. You don't have to call your senators. Call your representatives. We'll call, it's in the, it's still in the committee, in the education committee. We'll call the education committee representatives as well. But in the meantime, you still should call your representative, whether he or she is on the committee or not. Because we are in opposition of that particular bill. And the other bill that we were in opposition of was HB 194, and it did not cross over, and it's still in committee. So, and that was the one where there was the bill stated that it would decrease early voting days by 7 days and delete the Sunday voting, basically. So thank God we really fought that in the Capitol. So, but it's still in committee and it did not cross over, so they won't be able to vote on it. However, we were told to continue to monitor it until the close of the session, because sometimes legislators amend their bills to include a portion of another bill.
What is that bill?
That's HB opposed that. That was the transportation bill. So it's nothing we can do except make sure we follow that money. It's what, billions of dollars out of that now. Make sure that we get the contracts, that the minority and women get the contracts that's coming, after that transportation bill. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I think we're gonna transition, I think we need some clarification, we have some people here who wanna eat.
Okay, I just have one more thing. I have the,
I addressed that earlier, that how we gonna do it, that once you finish, we're gonna go into that, so I'll.
Well, we gonna eat, we got a person here who, she said she's gotta get something to eat.
Okay, she can go on and eat, but what I'm saying is, and that was addressed when I went up there, that once she goes to finish her presentation, then we gonna break, and then we gonna follow back up with, Mr. Rose.
I just have two more things and I'll be finished. The first was, well, number one, we do have a accuracy fixed plan here where you can take this information and go and meet with the state representatives and the state senators as well as the congressmen and our U.S. senators and ask them about what they're working on, what they're doing. But before you go, you need to know something about the district that they represent, your district. But in listening to all of what I have heard this morning, you do have something to take to them once you take your information and ask them questions. During your visit, you ask them various questions here, tell you to be polite, be clear and concise as to what you're saying, and then you follow up with your visit. But here, we have something to go to our representatives and senators about, because we've heard that we would like to see that the suspension of driver's license and those other professional licenses to be eliminated. So that's something that we can discuss, and we can go to our state representatives and ask them to work on a bill to do that. And we can start doing it now for the next legislature session starting in January. And in addition to that, Mrs. Westbrook stated about the setup, how to set up the child support to where it can be paid, work out some kind of process to do that. But we can do that. We can go and talk to them and ask them to prepare these bills to present. And at this point, we know that the Republicans are in the majority, and if you have a Republican representative, a Senate, just take a group of people with you and ask them if they would compile a bill to present to the legislature with regards to these two items, which are very critical to me, listening to the feedback and presentation of others. The last one, I said I only have two, but the other thing is that Medicaid, the Medicaid expansion, it sounds like it's a dead deal, but still we can call our governor deal and ask him to address that. And that's where we have 500,000 people who are entitled and should have health care, but they don't because our governor turned it down, and because they voted for a bill, HB 990, that passed that bill where the legislature would decide whether or not we should have it. But there are people, I'm sure you know about people, and then there are people who are dying who can get medical care because the money's in there. If you go to a pro-Georgia website, you can see how much money we're losing every day. So you can call Governor Deal. He has a very easy phone number, 404-656-1776. And ask him what is the status of that. What are we going to accept it here in the state of Georgia?
What was that phone number again?
404-656-1776. Accepting this money will extend health coverage to as many as 500,000 uninsured Georgians while pumping billions of dollars into the state health care system. The gentleman was talking about jobs. This is another way to get jobs. And you hate to say, well, they're not accepting it because they don't like President Obama, but it's kind of obvious. And that's so sad because so many people are losing out on health care. So if you can remember that, you call Governor Deal and call your representatives about State Bill 133 and ask them to oppose it. sure to, not forget to register to vote, and be sure to join the NAACP. I do have these advocacy planner forms that you can take to your representatives, because they work for us, as somebody has already stated, and we need to go to them and have them, and make them accountable for what they need to do to serve our community. So that is my discussion. Thank you so very much for having me, and I have to leave and go to another function here in Macon. I think Macon is just doing a lot of things today. So thank you so very much. Thank you.
And it's time to, we provide a lunch for you all. And, please don't leave, because we do have, another session, which is not gonna be very long, so when you get to food, please don't leave, we have some important information. I do just want to say one thing, that we have our own, votes issue here right here in this county, and we're trying to close the polls. Originally, it was 40 polls, there was 40 polls and closed in 19, but during the process, we found out that I think about 4 schools actually closed. And so I was selected to be on the advisory board for the board of elections to try to come up with a resolution. So I know they're trying to save money, but what it's going to do is going to cause a lot of people to be in long lines at the polls on election day. We're glad that that bill did not pass, when I voted pass in the session to cut out early voting, because it's going to actually make lines long. But we have to look at, looking at it, as I stated to the board of election, it does not, their intentions may not be discriminatory, but it looks discriminatory, because every polling place that's being closed is in the black communities. So we're talking about South Macon area had originally 7 voting places, they put it down to 3. And my concern was transportation. That's going to be an issue when they close the polls, the transportation. And I think they need to be very careful about taking a very close look at it because of the way it looks. So you all need to just keep follow up on that. I'm very premature right now. I can't really give you any information because we're still in the process of meeting. But just keep the TV on and read the newspapers and see what we're going to be doing today. But at this time, we have prayer. Pastor also.
Shall we pray? Eternal God, our Father, we thank you, Lord, for coming each of us this morning with loving kindness and tender mercy. We thank you for this great gathering, for the ideas that have been shared, and we pray your blessing on the things that we're trying to accomplish here. And we ask God that you just bless this food that has been prepared, that it will give strength and wisdom to our bodies, that we be better workers for your kingdom. Amen.
Amen.
People on the title that I work for the government. Let me tell you who I am. I grew up in North Philadelphia to a mother who was a drug addict and an alcoholic. I never knew my father. North Philadelphia is one of the worst ghettos in America. If you ever been there, you know what I'm talking about. I made it out of North Philadelphia, even though my mom was a drug addict and an alcoholic, and I never knew her. She ran all the bootleg houses in North Philadelphia. My uncles ran the largest gangs in the country, drugs, prostitution, all of it. But I made it out of that because my nana said that if you come to church, I'll make you banana pudding. I went looking for banana pudding and I found Jesus. I graduated with honors out of Wesley High and ended up going to the University of Southern California where I double majored in government and economics. I played sports, football, and baseball here. And I got drafted by the Dodgers and played 2.5 years of baseball with the Dodgers until I ran into the wall and busted up my knee, and then God allowed me to work in government. I ran the Democratic caucus for 6 years under Willie Brown. Some of you in here know governor, mayor, I mean not governor, but mayor, and he was the House Speaker of California. At one time, CNN called him the most powerful African American in the nation.
then Governor Pete Wilson. You may say, well, how could you run the Democratic caucus and then you run the Republican caucus? Because I went to school and I double majored in government and economics, and God allowed me to be an expert at writing legislation. So I was recruited by both parties. I'm not going to go into my party affiliation of what I believe in. And then I got recruited to come to California, to come to Georgia by a company by the name of Baxter to be the government affairs agent for the whole country. And I ended up being a youth pastor at New by the church. And then I ended up being a youth pastor at London Chapel, and that's where I now am, the assistant at London Chapel. But through all that, God has placed me in what I call a Joseph position. Or if any of the Bible readers in here, you know what I'm talking about. I sit at the table of Pharaoh to tell Pharaoh what our people need. We got it backwards in our community. We allow Pharaoh to come into our community and tell us what we need. When it should be the man of God or the woman of God telling Pharaoh what our people need. And so God has given me an opportunity to sit at the table. And so not only do I work for the Governor's Office of Transition Support and Reentry, but I'm also the commissioner of all the state charter schools. I approve and close them. Let me say that again. I approve and close them. This year I closed 2 schools. One misappropriated $687,000 of money that was supposed to go to black children. And I closed that school. I don't care about people's jobs if they're hurting our children. The other school that we closed, that we gave them a contract 6 years ago to turn around the grades. They didn't. So we gave them another year to turn around the grades. They didn't. In the school system that they were in, the school district, those grades was worse than the school district that they came from. In that district, we took away their accreditation because they were failing kids, and that county was called Clayton County. So we closed that school, and we opened up a new school with new people to help those kids that were getting a bad education. I'm going to tell you about reentry, but before I do that, you guys are eating food, so it's very helpful that I tell you this. Some of you are eating, it looks really, really good. I'm not going to eat it because I usually eat after I speak. But we close restaurants that gets a 69 in this state. If we close restaurants that get a 69 in this state, we should close schools that get 69 as well. Now, that might not be popular with everybody, but I've seen the numbers. I've traveled up and down the state. Last week, I was in Lee's prison. 800 men in Lee's prison. Majority of them are African Americans, have a growing population of Latinos. We have an aging population of men with canes and wheelchairs because of the censuses that they've got. But let me tell you this here. We are about to take over Lee's prison. So if you can take over Lee's prison, surely you should be able to take over a failing school where the kids are coming to prison. So when somebody tells you to vote for something, do your homework. And that's why I'm passionate. Lastly, I run the Booker T. Washington Center. There's some of you danced in, some of you did plays in there, some of you did arts and crafts there. There's a great deal of people in this room that know what I've been doing for 13 years here in the city. But every day, 5 days a week, over 300 kids come to my program. We pick them up from their schools. Some of them can't read. I don't get no funding from anybody. I raise my own money. We pick them up, we help them with their homework, we help them with their projects. We put their families back together. When they get in trouble, I go before the judge and talk to them. When they get in trouble in school, I go before them and talk to them in school. When they get kicked out of school, I go before the school and ask the school to put them back in. And when they eat food, we get them food. If they use power, we have more power in their homes. So after I speak, if you call me a sellout, then I hope you're doing more than I'm doing. I get off work at the state. I leave Macon at 4 o'clock in the morning to get to work for an 8 o'clock job at the Capitol. And the reason why I work at the Capitol is because I need to pay for Booker T. Because nobody gives me money for Booker T. Yet they use Booker T in grants. They use Pleasant Hill in grants. College Hill Corridor got a $20 million grant. Booker T was on page 786 on the master plan. That means part of that grant was supposed to do something for Pleasant Hill. I read the grant. The only thing that Booker T got out of that grant was a bike rack that sits in front of the building that can only hold 2 bikes. So those that can't stand Tony Loud in this city, that's okay. God said I'll make your name great. That's all I worry about. Let me tell you about reentry. The governor appointed me to the reentry position for the state, and we have what we call a Governor's Office of Transition Support and Reentry. Now, I know there's a lot of bills that cause what we call a lot of wedge issues in our communities. But we are doing some phenomenal things. I want to start out north first. Walker Prison. Walker Prison have over, what is it, Tony, almost 1,000 inmates in Walker Prison? About 1,200 inmates in Walker Prison. Walker Prison is what we call a faith and character prison. We have a seminary inside the prison, New Orleans Baptist Seminary inside the prison, teaching them about God. We have families. We have family day where families come up and they bring dinners to their sons who are incarcerated in the prison, and their children play with their fathers. We have a prison where inmates are working on their crafts, getting their education inside the prison. We have hired what we call in-reach counselors. And I'm about to hire 16 others. Stand up, Tony. See, sometimes, stay there, Tony, don't sit down. Tony is a former incarcerated citizen of Walker Prison. 12 years. Am I right, Tony? 12 years? 12 years. Now, Tony works for the Governor's Office of Transition Support for me. See, I don't just talk about reentry and come in here and get you all hyped up about something. We do reentry. And not only do we have a full-time job, but we got benefits as well. See, you're talking to the person who was really pushing the governor to ban the box. You can't ban the box unless you're really ready to hire somebody in the box. Let me know catch that in the parking lot. You can ban the box, but unless you want to hire somebody in the box, I have 16 other positions all around the state that we're about to hire folks from to work inside the prison. And watch this, where my brother with the bow tie. You still here? Okay. What we're doing from 6 months to a year when an individual's getting ready to get out, we are hiring an in-reach coordinator and in-reach counselors to do nothing but work with you before you get out. And we do an assessment. We do an assessment of what you need. Do you need housing? Do you need to be put back into family? Do you need an need a mentor, if you need a church. We do all that assessment for him or any incarcerated inmate that's on their way out. Now here's what we used to do. We used to do where when you get out, we analyze what you need, but nobody worked on the plan. The Bible says, write the plan, work the plan. So now we're working the plan. And so when he gets ready to get out, there's also what we call a community coordinator. My brother's there right there. Yes, sir. That's my friend brother right there. We got a connection. Do you work with one of our community coordinators currently right now?
I do.
And helping with these individuals get housing and dealing with their child support and all that stuff?
We do. We have a community coalition.
Ministry coalition. Now listen to me. He said a ministry coalition. Government has now said, we can't transform, and don't sit down here, brothers, I need you for a second. We can't transform men and women. The Bible says when Jesus walks into the community, he says, go tell the master who has a coat tied up, I have need of thee. The government is now saying, go tell the community and the religious folks that we have need of thee. You say you have a what coalition?
Re-entry coalition.
A re-entry coalition. Is there ministers on that coalition?
Faith community's there, agencies are there, community is there.
All there. Not only are they there, but my job is to hire in-reach coordinators who are faith leaders from their community. When have you ever heard the government tell you to go and hire faith leaders to work inside the prison? To do what they're called to do and pay them. Mother eyes got real big like that. Yes, that's my sole job as a hire faith leaders to work inside the prison to transform men and women before they get out. But while he's standing, we have probation that is at that table. Am I right, brother?
Yes.
We have the local police on that task force. We have the attorneys on that task force. We have salvation on that. Just go on and on. We do job fairs for those folks, right? Inside the prisons. The problem that we have is not enough people want to sit at the table with that coalition. Now we're building these coalitions in Macon is number one, Augusta, Columbus, Albany, Atlanta, and there's one other. Savannah. Those are first six. And what bothers me about those first six, those same people that want you to vote no on failing schools, I can take the map of all the failing schools and lay them on our 6 pilot stations, and all the little red dots fall on those 6 neighborhoods. So when they say pipeline to prison, I can prove it. Because we got failing schools. And I refuse as a black man that made out of failing community, stand there and allow kids to keep going to failing schools. And then come in here and get you all right up and don't give you the pass. Not only are we doing these 6 pilots, but we have 6 more pilots we get around. We also have a paid housing coordinator, am I right?
Yes, sir.
And what does she do?
Helps folks get housing when they come out.
Before they get out, she already have a plan for them to have housing.
She goes in, reach, that's right. I'm sorry, she goes in first.
And she talks to the inmates in prison. See, you need to know the facts. Now, is there a bill on the law? We're good now, brother. There is a bill on the law that has over-incarcerated, but watch this. What has happened is that at one time, the chief can tell me, he can vouch for this. At one time, we were a punishment state. We were just like Texas. We were just like California. We were punishing people and hurting them on the inside. And not only were we hurting them on the inside, we were bringing them back out enough to ignore that they were coming back. But our education budget can't be smaller than our prison budget. And so we're changing the way we do some things. Now, I mentioned these prisons for a reason. This past Thursday, we met with the warden of these prisons. We met with the captain over all the security guards. We met with the curriculum folks. The deputy commissioner of the Department of Corrections was there. The assistant commissioner of corrections was there. All the enemies people was there, because we are taking over these prisons not because it's doing bad things, but because we want to do something different. We've gotten grant money to turn the prison into an evidence-based prison. And what that simply means is that we're going to do something that they have never seen before, because what they're doing now won't work. We're going to take these inmates from orientation to the time they're released and do something different. Even if that means putting them in different color shirts than what they're wearing right now. Even if it means bringing in a bigger faith-based dorm or seminary. Even if it means turning the wood shop that they have down there into a real wood shop where they're working. Let me tell you what we're doing right now. Currently, we're having these prisons, and most of our prisons are in the South. They do work camps. They do work camps all day long. Then they come back to the prison. They get up the next morning, they do work camps, work details again. Now, some people may not like what I'm saying, but it's a fact. These work details, counties love them because they are free labor. Cleaning up the roads, on the back of trash trucks, cleaning up the county roads. We have inmates raising chicken, hogs, cows, slaughtering them and sending them to the market and buying back the worst part of those products and cooking it inside the prisons for their meals. And selling the best part of those products to the market. That is, my friends, a modern-day slave plantation. Some people want the status quo to stay, but I'm in the governor's office, and that's changing. Now, I know there's a lot of issues that we don't agree with the governor. I got up this morning, I was listening to Stephen A. Smith. One thing you know about Stephen A. Smith is from the hood. ESPN hired Stephen A. Smith because he runs his mouth, he tells it just like the TIE is. Stephen A. Smith said, today on CNN this morning, I had to jump out my bed and I couldn't believe he was saying this. He said that the black community needs to, one time, vote Republican. And the guy said, why? He said, because right now, nobody competes for the black vote. He said, companies, Nike, Adidas, all of them compete for different votes. They compete in the marketplace. He said, one time they needed to, I'm telling you about this, I couldn't believe it. But I'm going to tell you what I do know. And I don't agree with everything he does, but here's what I do know. I took 37 pastors from all around this state to the governor's mansion and sat down, and we had monthly meals with the governor. The people that serve, clean, cook, and work at the mansion wearing tuxedos, some of them are in prison for life. And as we sat at this long table with all these pastors getting served, turn the window, is put plates in front of all of them. And not one preacher at this table said thank you. And as the governor was standing in the middle of this table, as they set the plate down, he said, he would stop in the middle. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Daryl. Thank you, Malik. He knew every one of their names. There's 5 individuals right now that has maxed out and are now working all around the state because the governor got on the phone and called on their behalf. I watched this man cry because he is tired of how we doing things. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Running on re-entry, saying I'm going to change the way prisons do things, it's not going to get votes in certain communities. In this state, and I know the numbers, he got 13% of the black vote. And people say, well, how in the world did he do that? He ran on re-entry, and he ran on getting kids out of failing schools, putting families back together. I know that for a fact. See, I'm from the hood, I work in the hood, I live in the hood. I am not a sellout. I recognize game when I see game. And anybody that knows me, that seen me work in this city, I'm going to call game out. When I see preachers preaching prosperity gospel and their church is broke, I call it out. Churches should have an impact outside the walls, not just on the inside. You got a chief here who's doing some tremendous things in this neighborhood. But some people don't like him just because he's bivocational and work for the police department. Things don't mess, don't be on job. Come on. I'm going to call it out. Because if I don't call it out, then the blood is on my hands. Why? Because I got uncles in jail. I got sisters that are in jail. And my mother's been in and out. And what's common about them? They all went to failing schools. What do we have in common? They're black like me. I visit prisons up and down the state. I've been to transitional centers. We have transitional centers. Also what we do, we call staging. Prior to prison reform, we would punish somebody by moving them out of their communities. So if you got in trouble with Macon, we send you all the way to the Tennessee line to Haynes Prison. What happened? Your family comes see you once, comes see you twice, maybe 3 times. You serve your 15 years. It's time for you to get out. You can't find your family. Because for 14 years, they've stopped coming to see you. They don't walk away. We are moving inmates all around the country, all around the state of Georgia right now, bring them back closer to their families. We are doing it. Not only are we doing it, we're changing the way we police services. Some of you, I'm going to tell you something, I got tons of phone calls and emails when they heard I was going to speak here. From probation, from parole, and my boss. Because they didn't want me to speak. Because I tell it like the TI is. Now, the reason why they didn't want me to speak here is because our community has a bad rap of just hating the process. Am I right, brother? Now, hold on. Okay. Now, my phone call said they're not sitting at the table. I said, well, I'm going to go there and actually sit at the table. That coalition that I'm talking about. We're putting these coalitions at the table all around the state. Now, watch this. Those coalitions is where decisions are being made, am I right? And everybody are at that table. I need the NAACP at that table every time they meet. We can't just complain about it. We got to be about it. Now watch this. You got a good president. She can't make all the meetings. Somebody else got to go too. My sister here has been going to them. Right? You can't wear her out. Somebody else got to go. Now watch this. We are getting ready to apply for grants on mentoring, and we're not going to run them through the state, we're going to run them through those coalitions. If you're not at the table, the grant funds that are supposed to help with mentoring, because mentoring is the biggest piece. You get a person who's been incarcerated for a long time, they can't make it on the outside, why? They don't know how to be a man or woman. someone to give them that rites of passage to get out. Right? Now, there's a bill that will be signed sometime this month that's going to consolidate parole, probation, Department of Corrections, DJJ, under the office that I work under.
Amen, amen, glory.
Why is that? Because probation has a reentry program, parole has a reentry program, DJJ has a reentry program, DAX has a reentry program. All these different programs have reentry service, but they're not effective.
Amen.
Because they're pulling resources from folks where they're overlapping. And we gotta bring everybody to the table when we talk about reentry. We got juveniles that's sitting that turns to be adults. Who they fall up under? They fall up Department of Corrections, then. Well, if they haven't been knowing what case plan they have, Chief, then we just pass them on. And then they get out, we don't know why. We're putting charter schools, those who don't like charter schools, inside the prisons. Why? Because in the past, kids get GEDs. I'm not hating GEDs. It's good for those that make it and they can't get high school diploma. But last time I checked, they're pushing for more people to have a high school diploma before you get an interview. Kids are going into our prison systems with no education, so we got to find a way to get them high school diplomas. So why not? In Colorado, they have one of the best successful models of a charter school inside a prison giving kids their education. If you got them there for 4 years, that's the best time to get their attention. Healing Communities. Healing Communities is a program where we put together a network of churches. Hypothetically, if you or everyone here was from a different church, you are now a network of churches. We're bringing tools to this group of churches that help them on the inside of the prison and on the outside of prisons. How to reunite with the families, how to help with child support, how to help with education, how to get a job, how to deal with. We got 70% of people that are incarcerated right now are sex offenders. 70%. 70% are sex offenders. So we got to find ways for the church. Some churches in the state won't let them in. Some laws won't even allow them to be able to go to a church. So we're looking at ways of trying to how to deal with that. Not only are we creating healing communities, but we're creating what they call stations of hope. Stations of hope that church would get a logo where they can put on their marquee or their church, and that will be a sign that says, this church welcomes returning citizens. And you know the churches that won't accept returning citizens. And we also want to build an avenue where churches can go on the inside to work with these returning citizens. Now, for some churches, I'll get to the question in just a second. Some churches ain't gonna like that because what it means is that they don't want to do Paul and Silas' work. Paul and Silas was in jail. All his disciples spent some time in jail. And quiet as it kept, most of us sitting here at this table, including myself, would be in jail if it wasn't not for the grace of God. So we're doing healing communities. We also put $48 million of new monies in this year's budget for reentry, for housing, for education, all of it. We got states outside of Georgia asking our team to come and speak to their state about what we're doing in our prisons now. Ain't nobody gonna come in here and tell you that. Because it's not healthy for you to know that information. But you ever want to put something in the book and keep away from African Americans, put it in the book, put it in a piece of legislation, and read it. I heard a speaker up here say, call your legislator, tell them to vote no on SB 133. And when somebody said, what is SB 133? They said, it closed or intervened with failing schools. They don't close the failing schools. We're doing exactly what we're doing with failing prisons. We send somebody in there to turn it around. If you go to a restaurant at 69, you want it to be turned around. So, I'm done.
But just take a seat now. We're gonna have some questions, but we need Attorney Kendall. Attorney Kendall, we hate to be disrespectful, but you're gonna have to introduce yourself since our moderator left, and then we can present questions to both because a lot of people are on a strict time here. So.
Well, the topic that we just heard about is one I'm sure everybody wants to.
Well, we want you to go ahead and present first, and then we'll Mr. Loud, you got a little bit of time, right?
I do.
Both of you.
Okay, my name is Wayne Kendall. I'm an attorney. I practice law. I've been practicing law here in the state of Georgia since 1980. Started out practicing with the Attorney General of Georgia in the criminal division back in 1980, doing capital felony appeals. And basically, that translates into death penalty work and habeas corpus type work. I worked there for only a year because I figured out pretty soon after I got there that really wasn't my cup of tea. So I started my own firm in my hometown of Griffin, Georgia. I started practicing there. My brother joined me the next year, and we had another colleague of ours that joined us as well. And we basically started doing voting rights litigation all over the state of Georgia. I probably filed in excess of 23, 24, 25 voting rights lawsuits all over the state of Georgia. We never lost a voting rights case. The most recent case we filed was in Fayette County, Georgia, which is where I currently live. We won that lawsuit back in May of 2013. It was appealed to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals turned it around, and we're going to have a trial on the case sometime this summer in June, probably. So I want to talk a little bit about history. As you guys probably already know, this year is the anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. It was passed in August of 1965. Recently we celebrated Bloody Sunday over in Selma, Alabama. I don't know if anybody go to Selma? Okay. I was able to go as well. It was a great experience. Everybody should go see what that town is about. That is the birthplace of voting rights in the United States. I don't know if you know how all of that got started, and I want to kind of digress a minute and give somewhat of a history lesson about voting rights because I think it's important. This year is also the 150th anniversary of the end of the Civil War, when black people who were previously slaves got freed. So it's 150 years this year that black people got freed off of the Emancipation Proclamation went into effect on January 1st, 1863. Most people didn't realize freedom until the spring of 1865 when the Civil War ended. So it's 150 years of freedom. There's 50 years of passage of the Voting Rights Act. So this is a very momentous and important year as a milestone in the history of African Americans in this country. Now, back in January of 1965, there was an individual by the name of Jimmy Lee Jackson. Anybody know who Jimmy Lee Jackson was? Well, I'll tell you, Jimmy Lee Jackson was basically a farm hand. He spent most of his days plowing fields and southern Alabama. He was 26 years old in 1965 when he attempted to vote, attempted to register to vote more accurately. And he tried that for 5 times. And as a result of his attempts and others' attempts, there was a march in Alabama, in Marion, Alabama, his hometown. And as a result of that march, he got chased into a restaurant and was ultimately killed by some Alabama state troopers, protecting his grandfather, who also was trying to vote. And as a result of him being killed in Marion, Alabama in January of 1965, SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, decided that they were going to do a march from Selma, Alabama, which is close by Marion, to the state capitol in Montgomery. And when they initially tried to have that march on March the 7th, 1965, it was called Bloody Sunday. And I know you've seen pictures of that. John Lewis and Hosea Williams at the start of the march. And they were badly beaten. The video of that went worldwide. Everybody saw it. And that was the beginning of the end of Jim Crow as far as voting. A few days later, there was a second march that got stopped, and then eventually, after some court litigation, the marchers were able to complete the march all the way from Selma to Montgomery. Now, back in 1965, I was about 9 years old. I was born in 1955. And my father would gather me and my 2 brothers up, and every Saturday afternoon, we would go out selling Jet magazines. And here's the Jet magazine from March 18, 1965, 50 years ago this week. I collect these Jet magazines, 20 cents. And that was the beginning, I didn't know it at the time, but that was the beginning of my training as a lawyer. And what I do now is the same thing I used to do back when I was 10 years old selling Jet magazines. You say, how so? And I'll tell you how so. When you're 10 years old and your dad tells you to go sell a Jet magazine in Griffin, Georgia, and you got to go get out of the Volkswagen. We had a little 1964 Volkswagen, black Volkswagen. And I would have to get out of the car, take this Jet magazine up on somebody's porch, and they sitting out drinking a beverage that was illegal for me to drink. And 3 or 4 guys were sitting around playing checkers or whatever they were doing. And I walked on their property and asked them if they wanted to buy a Jet magazine. Well, what I was doing then is the same thing I do now when I go into a court, represent the client. The publisher of Jet magazine pays me about a nickel to sell this 20-cent Jet magazine. My clients pay me about the same amount of money when I go back and sit there in court. When I walk into somebody's house trying to sell a Jet magazine, technically, I'm trespassing on their property. They didn't invite me to come on their property to sell a Jet magazine. And when I go into court, sometimes representing my clients, I feel like I'm trespassing the way the judges look at me. Particularly when I represent folks outside of Metro Atlanta. And one of my clients is here right now, and she can tell you very well that I've been treated like trespassing over in Wilson County.
Yes.
And she has too.
Yes.
So, the stories that I tell, the magazine that I sell, there's a bunch of stories in it. So I go on people's property and say, hey, you need to read these stories. It will enlighten you. The same thing that I do when I go into court and I tell that judge, I got a story that I need to tell that you need to hear. So this was training for me as a lawyer at 10 years old to go sell these magazines. I didn't know it at the time. But it's the same principle. Because I was a child walking up to adults trying to get the attention of an adult, which is somewhat the same thing that I do in court when I'm trying to get the attention of a judge. He's an authority figure. He's a person that has what I want, which is some order that I'm trying to get out of him to be signed. Same thing I did back at 10 years old when I was selling these Jet magazines. I wanted that 20 cents. And I credit that training as a Jet magazine salesman with the skill set that I normally employ now, representing my clients. But more importantly, what I got out of these Jet magazines was a sense of history. A history of African Americans in this country. There's a saying that says, if you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it. So what I do typically and normally every so often is that I go back, I have maybe 100 of these Jet magazines from the 1960s. So what I do from time to time is that I go back and read these Jet magazines. Because these are the embodiment of our history. Sadly, this magazine is no longer published in hard copy in the United States. And in this particular magazine, I want to read you something because it's important to know about our history. This is from 50 years ago this week. And this is a story about Jimmy Jackson. And it said, young man tried to register. Jimmy must not have died in vain. Over and over these words were echoed at the 2 funeral services for Jimmy Jackson. The 26-year-old Negro died from bullet wounds suffered when police officials clubbed and brutalized civil rights marchers in Marion, Alabama. And it goes on to talk about the funeral, and Dr. King gave eulogy. And it further says he was a quiet boy, real quiet, lamented a member of the family. He had never been in any trouble before, his mother asked. One minister preached, here's a man born down in Perry County, picking cotton, plowing corn, and following a mule. But he dared reach down into the gutters of degradation, lifting his people up. We knew him as a man whose heart was tender. Now, the Voting Rights Act came about as a result, I think, of Jimmy Lee Jackson's death. Because Jimmy Lee Jackson propelled the Selma to Montgomery March. The Selma to Montgomery March propelled the Voting Rights Act. And its passage in August of 1965. The Voting Rights Act propelled a whole sea change eventually in electoral politics in this country that allowed African Americans to start to gain somewhat of a parity in the electoral process in the United States. And because of that, we all owe a debt of gratitude to Jimmy Lee Jackson's sacrificing his life. That's why I bring these people up, because they're being lost in history. Folks like him should be remembered. There should be a marker somewhere commemorating his life, because he was the progenitor of the Voting Rights Act. His death propelled the Voting Rights Act. Now, I want to talk a minute about the Voting Rights Act, where it is right now. You probably heard about the case that came down in June of 2013 called Shelby County. And that case has essentially eviscerated the heart of the Voting Rights Act. Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, with the pre-clearance provisions, was required public jurisdictions to submit all of their voting changes to the Justice Department before those changes would be enacted. And as a result of that requirement, many of the things that we see happening now could not have happened before Section 5 was eliminated from the Voting Rights Act. The NAACP president talked about closing the voting places. Well, there have been hundreds and hundreds of these changes just since Section 5 got eliminated from the Voting Rights Act less than 2 years ago. And we're seeing these polling places closed all over the country. We're seeing other changes which go to suppress our voting rights all over the country. We see the consideration of voter ID laws all over the country as a result of the Voting Rights Act losing Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which is the most important provision in the Voting Rights Act. And as a result, what we also want to see is that those gains that we have made in the electoral process are going to be gradually, over the years, eroded and eroded. There's a bill pending in the U.S. Congress to amend the Voting Rights Act. However, the chairman of the committee has given a statement that he sees no need to push that bill through, and it's not needed at this particular point in time. These are calculated measures to denigrate the hard-won accomplishments over the last 50 years in the area of voting participation. And what you can do about it is to contact your congressman, your representative in the House of Representatives, and your senator, and ask him to take some action on that particular bill that's now pending in the Congress. I want to wrap up by just talking a little bit about something that's going on right here in the state of Georgia, what I would consider a new technique in handling the deliberation of African Americans that have been elected to office. Throughout Georgia, particularly in counties with black majorities, there has been a surge in voter participation as a result of a number of efforts and a number of groups who have participated to make those things happen. As a result, those that would be anti-progressive with regards to African American voting rights have come up with new methodologies to challenge people in office. One of those methodologies is the removal process. What we are seeing now is that instead of attempting to defeat these candidates at the polls, which are becoming increasingly hard to do, particularly in these counties with African American majorities that are voting in unprecedented numbers, what we're seeing now is lawsuits to remove individuals from office. It happened out in DeKalb County. It happened in the Clayton County School Board. And then the governor, under this law that applies to school boards, is able to put his own people in. I'm representing a client right now, a lot of you know, in Gordon, and it's been on the news here incessantly. I think I got a call last night from the newspaper report. These laws we need to challenge. Right now, we don't have a good way to challenge them because a couple of years ago, in December of 2012, the Georgia Supreme Court issued an opinion in the DeKalb County schools that made it perfectly legitimate for elected officials to be removed from office. And on the city charters and county commission charters, there's always a removal provision. In the case of the city of Gordon, any one citizen can go remove a person from office simply by filing a complaint in court, in the Superior Court of Wilson County, for example. Any one person can go file a complaint and overturn the election of the people of that jurisdiction. And all it takes is one judge to remove that person from office if one person files a complaint saying that this person has quote-unquote exhibited malfeasance or misfeasance in office. Just think about that. Democracy can be turned on its head by one single individual. And that individual doesn't even have to be a registered voter. So these removal statutes are the new frontier in voter suppression. And that's what I want to end on as a note and leave that with you to think about that, because that will be the new frontier in coming years as we gain momentum demographically within this state going forward. Now, if I can, as a matter of personal privilege, can I respond to what Mr. Landon? Loud.
Well, we're gonna open it up for a few questions.
We kind of started off.
Yeah, go ahead and get started.
I was listening to Mr. Loud, he's from North Philly, and I can say he's absolutely correct. North Philly is, I've been to North Philly. North Philly is one of the battleground areas of America. I don't know what years you grew up at. What years you lived?
1960 all the way to 1980.
Yeah, well, it was 1960 to 1980. I was there in the 70s. So I have some good friends who from North Philly. And I've been there. And I have to commend him on getting out of North Philly. But what I want to say is about this school proposition, 133, HB 133. And I'm no expert on HB 133, I didn't follow it that closely, but what I do know about Mr. Loudon is that it proposes that the government is going to have these opportunity schools that he's going to take over. And these are going to be failing schools in the criteria, and I think there are about 40 of them that have been identified.
141.
141. And of course, these schools are, as we stated, in these areas, in black areas in these 6 cities. And I dare say that virtually all of those schools are majority black schools. Now, this proposal comes from a governor who has underfunded public education in this state over the last 5 years by some $8.4 billion. So, to me, I don't know, I'm no expert on any of this. To me, if the government has underfunded education by $8.4 billion in the last 5 years, you should expect to have some failing schools. I mean, because you have underfunded the very lifeblood of these particular institutions. So I don't see how. So it's kind of like, you saying, well, we're going to take over your car, we're not going to give you any money for gas, and then when you run out of gas, we're going to take over your car. So if you underfunded and cut the lifeblood out of these schools, and these schools have become pipelines to prison, it's because of the effects that have been wrought on these schools by the fact that you cut $8.4 billion out of public education over the last 5 years. And these reforms that we're talking about in prisons, they are well and good. I commend them. I want them. I'm all for reentry programs because we need them badly. But at the same time, we're creating a situation where this pipeline to prison is being fostered by the policies of this particular government. Now, I know I've been a lifelong Democrat. I never worked for Republicans. But I think that I can recognize good ideas regardless of whether or not it's a blue idea or a red idea. So started a long time ago. But the main impetus for these programs is changing attitude is because of the cost that have been wrought on the people of Georgia by laws that we have kept on the books, 2 strikes you out, lock them up, jail them, throw away the keys. Now that we can't afford these expensive policies, now all of a sudden it's not because the government loves to get rid of prison and people in prison. It's because these programs are breaking the state budget. I mean, these are the same people, the same law and order people that put these laws on the books in the first place. The same laws that call for taking a person's driver's license, keeping them from going to their job, all of that whole thinking is now turning around because they can't afford it any longer. That's why you do that. It's because the government cannot afford to keep that juggernaut going. That's why he's trying to get this whole thing going with regards to reentry. You shouldn't have. I want to respond to it, and I'd like to be able to respond to what he responds to. But yeah, the reason that these Republicans, Michael Boggs, now let me tell you about Michael Boggs, who is the guy that's the head of the Criminal Justice Commission that the governor put in place. Now this is the guy that he just recently promoted, or they promoted his peers promoted to a position on the federal district court. And we solidly oppose his position, his appointment to that position, because he is constantly and precipitously, this is a guy that voted against taking the Confederate flag off the Georgia flag. He's the guy that's the head of the Criminal Justice Reform Commission. Michael Boggs, he's a Court of Appeals judge from down in Ware County. And this is a guy that is over this whole Criminal Justice Reform Commission. And I've been in seminars and speaking engagements with him. But that is the impetus. And Mr. Boggs has admitted that we cannot afford to go down the road that we continue to go down. So we got to stop locking up everybody. Where I started practicing law in the Griffin Judicial Circuit, mind you, is the highest incarceration of any judicial circuit in the state of Georgia. The state of Georgia has the highest incarceration rate per capita of any state in the United States. The United States has the highest incarceration rate of any developed country in the Western world. So right up the street in the Griffin Judicial District is the locking up capital of the world.
Let's go ahead and respond to that question you presented.
One quick thing. Just to give you an example of when I started practicing law in Griffin with my brother and my two partners, every single lawyer that we had in our firm got locked up. My brother got locked up, and the sheriff refused to take him. He said he didn't need to get in trouble when he was in jail. So they locked him up in the courthouse. They tried to lock me up once, but I fought it, and they decided it was best not to. My partner, Randall Macon, got locked up one day for asking an improper question. Okay, so I fought this incarceration mentality for a long time. Okay? So, Mr. Loudon, you need to tell us that the governor has a pure heart and he wants to let all of these black people out of jail. And that's the reason and he wants them to get back with their families. And he wants them to take care of their kids and become productive citizens. And the reason that he's engaged in all this criminal justice reform is not for the fact that it's breaking the state's budget.
First of all, I applaud my brother for congratulating me for making that Philadelphia. One problem I have is that that's the only reason I'm there in the governor's office for as a trophy or let me just be real, as a house Negro. I'm not a house Negro. God appointed me there. I've earned it. I've done, anyone check my record, there's no evidence of me selling out my family, community, or people that look like me. I am on the Charter School Commission, and I know about charter schools. I'm also on the board for the Black Education Alliance for Opportunity. Okay, that is a national organization that is for one thing, that is educating black children across the country. Charter schools get less money than regular schools. We approve charter schools so that they can go in and do something innovative and different. There's a charter school already in big county schools called the Hutchinson Career Center. That's a charter school. It's called a conversion charter school. Okay? ACE charter school, which is almost 70% white, 23% black, 7% others. That is a big county locally approved charter school. Now, most of the people who was in private schools like FPD, Mount DeSales, other Caucasians have moved their kids into that school. And no one has said a word. DeKalb County has 26 of the 140 schools on that family list in their district. There's one school called Path Academy, and I wish Reverend Denise was here. There's one school called Path Academy, 98% free and reduced lunch, 7% African Americans, another 30% are Latinos who have just got here where English is their second language. They're beating every school in the state on grades. Every school, CRCT, reading, you name it, they beat everybody. They are number one. And they're in a poverty-stricken neighborhood. The opportunity, that's the key word, opportunity state school districts are for schools like Bibb County. Let's just deal with Bibb County. There's 14 schools in this system right here in your neighborhood that has been failing kids for 10 years or more. And the last time I checked, governors, just a second, brother, you didn't just interrupt him. Let me finish and I give you questions. The last time I checked, Governor Neal's only been in office for 4 years. He's working on his 5th year. So if the school's been failing for 14 years in a row, there's somebody else. The other thing last time I checked, the austerity cuts that was checked, that was replaced, that was cut on teachers, all was replaced and even another 30% more in schools this year. Last time I checked, Atlanta Public Schools get $15,000 per child per year. Bibb County, based on their tax dollars, gets $7,000 per kid per child per year. Charter schools get $4,500 per child per year. And they're outperforming the ones we give more money to. What's happening is those that support the teachers and the superintendents and the boards are saying, we don't want to do that thing called charter schools. We want to remain the same. Well, I'm going to tell you something. I have a daughter in this state. She's 8 years old. And I'll be darned if I'm going to let her stay in a failing school if I get a choice. Most blacks in our community can't afford charter schools. And now whites are saying we can't afford private schools either. So we would love to have an opportunity. There's nothing wrong with opportunities. I'm not saying charter schools are the silver bullet. But what I am saying, that we deserve a choice. You shouldn't have to pay twice, $15,000 a year to send your kids to mount themselves. Now, as I close and get to this question about prison reentry reform, I am not going to allow R or D to interfere with men like Tony Kitchens, who deserve a second chance to come back into his community. He's been back with his wife. He's back with his son, who's now in college. He's now working for our state. To be led down our state to say, you know what, it's a bad idea because I didn't think about it. I know the history of the Republican Party because I've vetted it for myself. I know the history of the Democratic Party because I've vetted it for myself. What that means, I've worked in the Democratic Party for 7 years. I ran the Democratic caucus, and I've ran the Republican caucus. Our children can't spell Republican or Democrat. And we put them as wedge issues and fights over issues. I can't do that. He made some valid points. In 1965, African-American men, 5 of them, sat in North Carolina, sat at a restaurant, and they demanded to be served because they could read the menu. Here in 2015, we got adults who have graduated from G.B.R County schools can't read the menu.
Okay, you talk about the judges overturning the election. That's not like a Republican thing you talking about with this judicial activism. Is that the same thing that they always talk about, judicial activism, judges taking the authority to distinguish the difference between that and what they talk about?
That ain't my language.
And then let me ask you this question before let me ask 2 questions. I'll have to get back up again. I want to ask them, how you gonna do re-entry when you can't get folks out with this SB 440, 441? How can you, I know.
Which one you want first?
I know the history of things. They all never put this on us. Okay. He was a Democrat. So.
Right.
But you gotta remember that a lot of these Republicans used to be Democrats. And so, we don't know what's what anymore. But anyway, if you could ask that question about SB 440, you talk about the judicial activism.
Okay. Let me define judicial activism. When a judge in California lets a person out of jail because his due process rights were violated and his equal protection rights were violated, that's called judicial activism. When the U.S. Supreme Court intervenes in the Florida election and decides that the Florida election goes to Bush on equal protection grounds, and that's just strict construction of the Constitution. Okay? I don't know if y'all got that.
Yeah. Repeat it again so I can learn something. I'm trying to learn.
When a judge lets a person out of jail because his due process rights were violated and his equal protection rights were violated, that's judicial activism. But when the Supreme Court says Bush wins Florida because of equal protection, then that's strict obstructionism of the Constitution. So that's the difference. It's result-oriented, outcome determinative. So if you use the Constitution, use the 14th Amendment to obtain a result for individual rights, then that's judicial activism. But if you use the same provision to allow a conservative to become president, then that's not judicial activism. You know, when they intervene in the voting rights case and use equal protection to strike down Section 3 and Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, even though Congress had just reauthorized the Voting Rights Act by a vote of something like 99-1 in the Senate, and overwhelmingly in the House, maybe 2 or 3 votes against, then that's not judicial activism. It was obvious that the intent of Congress was to keep the voting rights on the book as it was when they reactivated it in, I think, in 2008. So judicial activism is a term of art, depending on who's accusing who of being an activist. Okay, when they put the folks out of office, when this particular judge put my client, Mary Lou, out of office a few months ago, he said he was following the law. I could find no basis for it, particularly when he did it on a hearing where they called me at 1:30 and said, we have a hearing at 3 o'clock. And then I learned I couldn't get to the hearing, obviously, because I was 111 miles away. And then they suspended her from office at a hearing which there are no witnesses that anybody knows about. There's no transcript of the hearing that anybody knows about. And then I found out that the hearing, which was held on Tuesday, was being planned on the previous Friday. And I learned about it an hour and a half before the hearing. I would say that was judicial activism. Because the judge could pick up the phone and say, can you get here to this hearing on Tuesday at 3 o'clock? Instead, I got a call at 1:30. Maybe if I worked for the government, I could have got his jet and gotten there in time. Park and land and Willis, all that. So, let me let Mr. Loud answer your other question about
your question about the bill that has locked up a lot of men. And you and I have had conversations about this. And I'm going to say that you and I are both on the same page. Okay?
Did the governor on that page?
I'm getting ready to answer that question. Okay? You will find out, and I'm not sure if Mr. Wendell knows this, but I'm at that prison reform hearing every month that they meet. That particular issue is in that prison reform. And what our job is, in my office that I'm in, we submit recommendations to that prison reform commission, which turns into policy. Georgia, unlike other states, is what they would call a part-time legislature. I come from a state where I learned all about politics, where legislation is full-time, which is California. Most states in the union is full-time legislature. Georgia is a part-time legislature. By this end of this month, your government closes and they go home. Okay? So the policies that we're trying to get through are policies that was developed on last session. Now, the stuff that we're putting in this year's prison reform are legislation that we're trying to get. And you might have people say, well, you could have done that with an executive order. You could have done that with an executive order. And I'm going to tell you, when people say you can do an executive order, first thing they start saying, you're dictating to us what you're trying to do. We are biting off these apples as much as we can, but I can tell you this, that we have a success rate in Savannah right now of over 100% of returning citizens in one shot with our coalition getting housing and jobs and keeping them out. We are doing it. Now, I know for a fact I'm going to get called to sell out a house neighborhood on the reason why you didn't need a black face and all that good stuff like that. But most people don't know my pedigree and what my real job is. I'm with black kids every day whose fathers are locked up, whose mothers are locked up, whose father and uncle is locked up, and who they're on their way there too if I don't do something. So I'm in the process of making that happen. And lastly, I've met guys in these prisons that I visit that have been victims of those same put away and punishment laws. Just down in Walker, there's a whole dorm of individuals with wheelchairs and canes where the state done got their pound of flesh. So when we talk about reentry for them, reentry really not going to help them because they're never going to be able to make it on the outside. But yet they're coming. So we're working on that. We're doing everything we can to work on that piece of legislation. That I promised you, and anybody in this city that know anything about me, when I make a promise, I do my best to fight for that promise. I'm not a sellout. My brother.
Come in front and ask a question back. And you are in the governor's office, in his circle. My question is, does the governor know that in Meigs, Georgia,
In what, Georgia?
Meigs, we have a mayor there who been removed out of office twice. And I'm just skipping right along. And like I said, my question will get in. In Dawson, Georgia, we have a mayor, Chris Wright. By the way, the mayor in Meigs, Georgia, is Linda Harris. We have a mayor in Lumpkin, Georgia, Charles Gibson. We have a mayor in Davisboro, Georgia, Johnny Strickland. We have a mayor in Warrenton, Georgia, George Ivy. By the way, Chris Wright was shot 6 times and left in his yard for dead. His neighbor came over. For whatever reason, he's still alive. And won his second term here this year to be mayor again of that city. And in Lumpkin, Georgia, a city council member, white Debbie Stone, called this black mayor a nigger. And in Gordon, Georgia, this mayor had been removed from office twice and would have been totally destroyed had it not been for the citizens, God, and an excellent attorney. Now, I know you can't answer this question, but I would like for you to pass this question on to the governor. How can the governor allow these things to happen? He are fully aware of them because I've sent him information. So my question is, and you use the term about a sellout Negro. Now, I have never called a white person the name that they use to refer to whites negatively, nor have I ever used the word that you use here today, a sellout Negro, to any black person. But whether you are what a white person is or whether you're what a black person is, your reputation, as you said earlier, speaks for itself. So what I'm saying is that if the governor is aware of all these things that these mayors are going through, it's totally tearing these cities apart in the state of Georgia. It's not just the mayors. If you go to Boston G.B.R. on YouTube, you can see them. I cannot understand why, if this governor is concerned about the prison system, the education of our children, and everyday common families, these communities who see a mayor who is elected by the people to be banned from their offices, et cetera, et cetera. I won't get into that because I'm finna take my seat. My question is, why have not the governor responded to the pain and suffering of the people here in the state of Georgia that's suffering every day? And it seems like there's a pattern in practice and it's spreading throughout Georgia. I've been to 11 cities. The governor have all my videos or he's shooting. My question is, would you please pass that on to the governor, please?
Let me address your question. Your question was, would I pass it on to the governor? Yes. Absolutely, I would. The first thing I'm doing, I'm going to vet it. I'm going to vet the information. I'm going to do my homework and do my research. And before you leave here, you give me the name and the address that you done sent the information to, the person who you done sent it to, and I will vet it. That's just who I am. The only reason I said that, and no disrespect to my brother, okay? Because I believe we all have something to give to our communities, is that, and I might have took this wrong, but when he said, I know why you're there, no one knows why I'm there in a position other than what God has put me there. God ordains me, promotes and put me where I'm at, and I'm going to do my job to do what God's called me to do. So the answer is yes, I will. I'll give you my information, and we can have some follow-up.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
The program that you're working with right now is the prisoners and bring them back into the community. Other states have called that SRP, straight readiness programs. Could you speak on the Kairos? We're talking about the churches and all that are coming in. Well, there's two things. For the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, I was a caregiver to a sex offender. He wasn't allowed even in his own church anymore, and that really broke his heart. And you were talking about churches who will welcome these people in. So there's still an issue with that going on. And again, would you speak on Kairos?
We're working, and I'm glad you mentioned it. Just last week, I met with the executive arm of Kairos of Georgia. We just had a big presentation up in Forsyth with the Kairos of Georgia. We just did the training for all the Kairos at Tift College as well. We are working on coming up with ways of where those churches that will welcome in sex offenders back into their churches, we're working with that as well. Keep in mind, we still got to protect our children and our women, even males. There are folks right now who are labeled sex offenders in our prison systems. Not only did they go in as sex offenders, but they are also raping men or women right inside the prison. So we have to be very, very careful so that one of them who do get out is not ruining it for everybody. Because you know, and I'm sure Attorney Wendell will say this, I'm sorry, Kendall, I'm sorry, please forgive me, brother, please forgive me. You and I both know that if one individual, Polly Class, was kidnapped from her bedroom, and when she was kidnapped from her bedroom, the legislators got together, because here's the suburban young lady who was kidnapped from her bedroom by a prisoner who had just got out, and he raped and killed her and threw her on the side of the road. There became, in an election year, 3 strikes you're out. And it went from California all across the state, from 3 strikes you're out to 2 strikes you're out, and now you're seeing the evidence of what has taken place with it. We all know that, and we don't disagree with that. But whatever we put together, we still got to make sure that one individual don't blow it up for everybody.
Well, would you explain to the folks what the Kairos program is?
Yes. Kairos is a great program. It's religious leaders that go inside the prison, mentor and meet with individuals inside the prison. They do a great job. The one problem that we have is that by their own rules, they can't meet with individuals once they get out of prison. And we're trying to change that because there's some Kairos folks that go to school and they want to build a halfway house. And we're going to try to change those laws to make that work for them. Yes, ma'am. I know you've been trying to get me early.
Macon was failing 14 years ago. Okay, I'm a nurse, I'm a Republican, I'm always supporting any kind of school. I'm a teacher of nursing, and I believe in teaching, and I believe teachers have the ability to teach in their backyard. But I know that as a teacher of nursing, my students had to take a test at the end. They were nursing students, they want to be registered, have a license to nurse. That put stress on those girls and boys, and it was sometimes almost not, they were almost not able to handle it. These adults in nursing school managed though because they had the ability by then to handle that stress. Now, along comes No Child Left Behind. Now, what year was that? Put the test in the school. I'm a teacher of nursing, but my specialty is pediatric nursing. That is undue stress on children. I never have agreed with it. Then there was Race to the Top. Then you get a waiver from No Child Left Behind. It had Common Core standards. This is an illness. This is infecting every school. It doesn't matter if you're whatever kind of school you're in. It can be that charter school. They're all going to have to face the test that's been done by the people who have structured the Common Core. That SAT test, those tests to get into college, and they're running the colleges. So those students, no matter what they learn, they're going to have to follow that Common Core. So why has the governor embraced it?
Your question about Common Core? Yes. Would you like to ask me to ask the question about, there are 2 questions. You mentioned the tests as well.
Well, the tests are part of the Common Core.
Okay.
It began though years ago.
And you asked me, one of your questions was, how do you judge failing schools? And can I answer all 3?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I'll just tell my friend back there, Tony Kitchen, that I've seen you in several meetings that we've been a part of, and I've seen you at Republican events, and I know that you're a Republican and stuff like that. I know you stand on Common Core and testing and all that stuff. But here's how we measure it. Somehow we have to measure the effectiveness inside the school, inside the classroom. Because what's happening is that inside some of those classrooms, not all of them, we got some great teachers in this. I had a great teacher inside the hood of North Philadelphia. But in some classrooms that we have amateur night at the Apollo. And what's happening is that those schools are not getting the best of the best. And I'm glad we're right here. Because right down the street in Vineville is one of the best schools in the state.
Right here is one of the best.
Okay? Vineville Academy. Now let me finish. In the middle of Vineville Academy, we have this private school, which is one of the best schools in the area. A parochial school. Now let's walk over here in walking distance, right behind this school, L.H. Williams. For 15 years in a row, they have received the letter F. And the standard is, can the children read? Can the children add? And are these kids able to graduate? And if the chief wouldn't have left, and I'm sure my brother here knows this, we build jail cells in this country based on third grade reading scores.
That's right, that's right.
So, if I got 3 schools in walking distance, there shouldn't be no difference. Well, maybe at this parochial school, because they're private, they get the private money, teachers, parents pay to be in it. But Vineville Academy and L.H. Williams, 2 big county schools, one is making all the grades and the other over here. So I do my homework and I ask myself why. Good teachers are sent to Vineville, bad teachers are sent to L.H. Williams. Good principals are sent to Vineville, bad principals are sent to L.H. Williams. Now, well, Mother, I agree that the community is bad, but let me make the argument for that case as well. It's not the culture on the outside that I'm worried about, it's the culture on the inside of the schools. If you send me principals to let anything go inside the schools, then that's going to be a problem. If anything don't go here at this parochial school, ask yourself why Howard is better than all the other schools in the inner city. Because Howard is close to the county line where people like us don't usually go to. So all I'm saying is, it's about time that this came up. Is it the best? No. Do I agree with Common Core? There's a lot about I don't agree with Common Core. But just as you as a nurse practitioner, you had to take the test to tell me that you can do your job to take care of somebody. We need our kids to know whether or not they got what they can get.
Look, we're going to have to wrap it up. Y'all going to have to ask these individual questions and have a discussion after the meeting because there's some people here who got to know. Our child support enforcement people are out of the state, now the question. I can tell they're getting, I know you got to go. So anyway, let's go ahead and close it out with a prayer. And yeah, they got another meeting going on, something in blue, get it blue. What's there, Lord? A meeting going on over there or something.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and close it out with a prayer. Y'all can ask questions if they can explain out a little bit.
Our first vice chair of Rotary and NAACP, our third vice chair, Pastor Ray, and Diane, you on the executive board. In the executive board members come up right quickly. Our second vice chair is here. Executive board members, please come up. Mr. Dillman is our first vice chair. Pastor Ray is our third, Ms. Lemon is our secretary, and on behalf of the NAACP, of Bill Cannon, and I'm on the executive board of the local NAACP, on behalf of our secretary, third vice chair, executive board member, first vice chair, executive board member, we thank you all for coming out to support this mass meeting. And our next mass meeting is